to this video lecture, and in today's video lecture I will be solving previous year's NEET questions and discussing the answers, and this is for the chapter as you can see on your screen, digestion and absorption, and this is part 2 of the series. Okay, so let's not waste more time and begin. Okay, so question number 1. Brunner's glands are present in, this appeared in the year 1999. Okay, let me change the ink. Sorry, keep it blue. Brunner's glands are present in A. Stomach, B. Esophagus, C. Ileum, D. Duodenum. So direct question, no need to think, you should know the answer. Okay, so Brunner's glands are present in duodenum. So your answer should be D, clearly. Okay, let's go to the discussion. Okay, so Brunner's glands are present in the submucosa of the duodenum. So remember, Brunner's glands are exclusive for duodenum. Just remember that. Okay, remember that information, that Brunner's glands are exclusive to duodenum and they are present in the submucosa. And if you watched my previous lectures, you know that Brunner's gland, they secrete an alkaline fluid that contains mucin. Okay, and this protects the mucous membrane from the acidic stomach contents. So when chyme enters from the stomach into the duodenum, they're acidic. Okay, because stomach has acid. Okay, so now to protect the layer, the mucous membrane, Brunner's glands are present there in the duodenum that release or secrete an alkaline fluid that protects the membrane, the surface. Okay, so clear, this was direct. We'll move on to the next question. Okay, question number 2. The layer of cells that secrete enamel of tooth is, this appeared in 1998. Okay, A. Osteoblast, B. Odontoblast, C. Dentoblast, D. Ameloblast. So your answer should be D. Ameloblast. Okay, so yeah, they secrete enamel of the tooth. Okay, this is again a fact, please remember it. Let's go into the discussion. Okay, so the outer part of the tooth is called enamel. All right, and is made up of a layer of epithelial cells called ameloblasts. So these ameloblasts create the enamel of the tooth. Now, the layer of enamel is formed before the eruption of tooth. Okay, and once the tooth is erupted, no more enamel is formed. Okay, so this you should remember, that the enamel is formed before the eruption of the tooth, and once it is created, once the tooth is erupted, the enamel is not formed. Okay, there's no more formation of enamel. Okay, so this is a diagram of a tooth. So you can clearly see this is the outer portion, over here the enamel. Okay, clear, this was again a direct question, right? No problem in answering this question, right? Let's move on to the next one. Okay, question number 3. Which one of the factors are required for the maturation of erythrocytes? And this appeared in the year 1998. You have A. vitamin B12, you have B. vitamin C, C. vitamin D, and D. vitamin A. So clearly it is A, vitamin B12. Okay, this is one of the factors that's required for the maturation of erythrocytes. The answer is A. Okay, let's go to the discussion. Okay, so RBCs, as you know, need to be continuously replenished in the circulatory system. Okay, and there are 2 factors that play an important role, okay, in the final maturation of RBCs. Okay, so initially when they are produced, they are formed as reticulocytes, and then they mature into the final stage of RBCs that then enter into the circulation. Okay, now these 2 factors are vitamin B12, which answers our question, cyanocobalamin. Okay, that's another name for it. So in case if they write cyanocobalamin, they know they're talking about vitamin B12. You should know that. Okay, and the other is folic acid. Okay, the other is folic acid. Please remember this one, and this fact 2. Okay, vitamin B12, cyanocobalamin, and folic acid are very two important factors that are responsible for the maturation of erythrocytes. Okay, and it could be a potential MCQ also. Okay, so please remember this. Okay, 1 second, let me erase this part. So vitamin B12 and folic acid are essential in forming thymidine triphosphate. Okay, they are essential in forming thymidine triphosphate. Now why do we need vitamin B12 and folic acid? Okay, because they are essential in forming thymidine triphosphate, and this is an important element in building DNA. So now you understood why, right? So if there's lack of vitamin B12 or folic acid, there's a deficiency of that in your body, then this will result in abnormal and diminished DNA. Obviously, then there'll be failure of nuclear maturation and cell division. Okay, so there'll be an abnormal and diminished DNA. There'll be a failure of nuclear maturation and cell division. Furthermore, macrocytes will be formed. Now macrocytes are enlarged RBCs. Okay, they are enlarged RBCs, okay, which enter the circulation, and because of their fragile nature, they live a short life. So now what happens is, when these macrocytes then enter the circulation, so they are like big circular shaped RBCs, which is unlike the actual RBC, which is supposed to be a biconcave structure, right? You have a biconcave structure. Okay, this is a normal RBC, a biconcave structure. You don't want a round shaped RBC. Now the round shaped RBCs are very fragile. The cell membranes are very fragile. Okay, they break easily. Okay, the biconcave structure is a very rigid structure in the circulation. Okay, so this is long lasting, but this lifespan of this structure, this type of structure is not long lasting, and then they tend to break. They are very fragile in nature. So because of that, we don't want this macrocytes entering our circulation. Because of then vitamin B12 and folic acid are required for the maturation of erythrocytes. Okay, so that is why, to answer your question, let's go back to our question again. Yeah, which one of the factors are required for the maturation of erythrocytes? Clearly vitamin B12. If there's folic acid, then yes, folic acid also, instead of vitamin B12. All right, so this is a good question. I haven't given smiley faces for a long time. Okay, so remember this. All right, so clear? We'll move on to the next question. Okay, question number 4. Invertebrates, lacteals are found in, and this appeared in 1998. A. Esophagus, B. Ear, C. Ileum, D. Ischium. Okay, so clearly lacteals are found in ileum. Okay, so your answer should be C. Okay, let's go to the discussion. So, okay, so now each villi, okay, that is present in that epithelium, yeah? The epithelium has microvilli. So there's a central lacteal that is present. That forms the core of the villi, the villus. Okay, so the central lymphatic system called lacteals. Okay, inside that we'll see a diagram so you can understand it more clearly. And they end blindly at the tip. Okay, and anatomically they're placed like that. They end blindly at the tip of the villus, and proximally it ends at the network of lymphatic systems. Okay, lymphatic vessels, sorry. So on top it's a blind structure, and then it goes down like that proximally. That means at the bottom side there's a network of lymphatic vessels over here. Okay. Now chylomicrons, okay, they're lipoproteins. That when you study fat digestion, you will come across this term over here, chylomicrons. They are absorbed by lacteals in the villi. Okay, yeah. So here you have a nice structure over here. See the central lacteal over here? It's pointing over here. Yeah. And you have your blood capillaries, you have your artery, vein, and over here, see it. There's a blind tip over here. Okay. And then proximally, I'll use another. Proximally, it ends in lymphatic vessels. Okay. There's a blind tip over here. And this is the central lacteal. Okay, this whole thing is the villi that you see outside. This whole thing is the villi. Okay. So clear, you have got an understanding of where the lacteal is actually placed in the epithelium. Okay, let's move on. Clear? I think I've answered the question. Invertebrates lacteals are found in ileum. Okay, this is related to the intestine. So clear? All right, let's move on to the next question. Okay, question number 5. Identify the cells whose secretion protects the lining of gastrointestinal tract from various enzymes. And this appeared in NEET 2019. So you have A, duodenal cells, B, chief cells, C, goblet cells, D, oxyntic cells. Now you have to find the cells whose secretion protects the lining of GIT. Okay, so which secretion protects the lining? Clearly it's goblet cells. Okay, so your answer should be C. All right, please do this as and when you pause the video when I've read the question. Pause the video, think about the answer, and then come back. Okay, so it'll help you to understand where you're going wrong and where you know for sure. All right. Okay, so let's go to the discussion. Okay, so goblet cells or mucus cells, they have an expanded upper part that is distended with mucin granules. So they look like goblets. No, goblets are like those glasses. Like this is what a goblet glass looks like. Okay, so these cells are also structured similarly like this. Okay, they have a expanded upper part and their mucin granules present inside that. Okay, that's why they call goblet cells. So now it's easier for you to remember this. Okay, they're also called as mucus cells. Okay, so the nucleus is flattened in goblet cells near the base of the cell. The luminal surface has irregular microvilli. They have a well-developed Golgi complex and abundant rough endoplasmic reticulum. Okay, so this is just some information about what goblet cells are and what do they look like. Okay. Now they respond to local irritation of the epithelium. So whenever there's a local irritation, whenever there's an irritation in the epithelium, these goblet cells respond to that. Okay, and what they do is they begin to secrete mucus. Okay, this mucus that is secreted on the surface of the epithelium. Okay, and which acts as a lubricant to protect it from digestion. So you don't want your mucous membrane to be digested along with these enzymes that are digesting all the nutrients that are entering your intestine, right? So you want to protect that layer. So what happens is whenever they sense that there's an irritation in that epithelium layer, they begin to secrete mucus. Okay, and then mucus tends to protect the intestinal epithelium, the surface epithelium. Oh, sorry. This is the next question. Let's go back to the discussion. Okay, so clearly it is goblet cells. It protects the lining from various enzymes. Okay, so clear. Again, direct question. Let's move on to the next question. Yeah. Okay, so question number 6. Which one of the following vitamins can be synthesized by bacteria inside the gut? Okay, and this appeared in 1997. So you have A, D, okay, that's vitamin D, B, vitamin K, C, vitamin B1, and D, vitamin C. Okay, so which one of the following vitamins can be synthesized by bacteria inside the gut? It is vitamin K. Okay, if you didn't know this answer, please remember it is vitamin K. Okay, so your answer should be B. This is a good question actually. Please note down the discussion. Okay, this is actually a good question. So substance, now we in our gut there is bacteria present there. Okay, then there are substances that are formed as a result of bacterial activity. Now what are these substances? Please make a note of this, okay, in your books. There's vitamin K that is formed. We've already discussed that. There's vitamin B12, there's thiamine, there's riboflavin, and gases, okay, such as carbon dioxide, hydrogen gas, and methane, which contribute to flatus, okay, the gas that is produced, okay, that's called flatus, okay. So CO2, hydrogen gas, and methane contribute to that, okay. Please make a list, okay, this is important. They could ask that in NEET. Now vitamin K forming bacteria is important, okay. Now you know why they've asked this question. Was vitamin K forming bacteria is important in the gut, okay, because the amount of vitamin K that we take is not sufficient for the needs of our body, okay. So now you remember vitamin K is responsible for blood coagulation. Remember blood coagulation, go back and read blood clotting. Vitamin K is important for blood coagulation, and so this bacteria helps in compensating for the vitamin K that is not consumed, okay, it is not consumed through our food. So this bacteria forming vitamin K contributes to that, it fulfills that or compensates for that vitamin K, okay, because vitamin K is important for maintaining adequate blood coagulation, okay. So this is a good question. Please note it down in your notebooks, okay. All right, so clear. Move on to the next question. Okay, question number 7. A polysaccharide which is synthesized and stored in liver cells is A. arabinose, B. glycogen, C. lactose, and D. galactose. Okay, and this appeared in 1995. So stored in synthesized and stored in liver cells, clearly it is glycogen. Glycogen tends to break down into glucose, right, whenever there's a need for energy. So your answer should be B. Okay, it is a polysaccharide. Okay, so let's look at the discussion. So you can see here all cells can store some glycogen, okay, but liver cells can store up to 5 to 8% of their weight as glycogen, and muscle cells can store up to 1 to 3% of glycogen. So it doesn't mean that none of the other cells can store glycogen. There is always some glycogen present there, but liver cells and muscle cells can store, tend to store a large amount of glycogen. Okay, this is just extra piece of information regarding the percentages that are given here, okay, just for you to understand. Okay, so glycogen molecules can polymerize into any molecular weight, and they remain precipitated in the form of solid granules, okay. So this is an interesting piece of fact, okay, for you to understand that glycogen molecules don't remain in the dissolved state, okay. There are polysaccharides, they can polymerize into any molecular weight that they want, but they don't remain in the dissolved state inside the cells, okay. They remain in the they remain precipitated in the solid granular form, okay, unlike glucose which remains in the dissolved state. So glucose will tend to affect the osmotic pressures, correct, but if something that is present in the solid granular form does not remain in the dissolved state, will not tend to change the osmotic pressure. So just imagine if glycogen was present in the dissolved state, it would alter the osmotic pressures, okay. So this prevents any alteration in the osmotic pressure. So just imagine if you have a cell, let's say you have a liver cell or muscle cell, and you have glycogen over here, and just imagine if this glycogen was in the dissolved state, okay. This glycogen over here was in the dissolved state, okay, this is dissolved, just imagine. So what would happen? There will be more solute concentration over here, correct. So the outside environment would be hypotonic as compared to the inside environment inside the cell. So there will be more water concentration as compared to inside the cell. So water will tend to move from high concentration to low concentration. Okay, water will move from high concentration to low concentration. So we create a hypotonic environment outside. Okay, now this is just an example, okay, just to help you understand. The glycogen is not like this, but how it will alter the osmotic changes, osmotic pressures, if it was present in the dissolved state. So nature has designed it in such a way that it is present in the solid granular form, it is remain in the precipitated form. Okay, just imagine if glycogen was actually in dissolved state, it would just create chaos. Okay, it would create havoc in the in the whole system. We won't have a balanced system. Our the whole body or nature as such is designed to always be present in a balanced state of form. Okay, we always want homeostasis. Okay, just remember that. All right, so clear? Okay, we move on to the next question. Okay, so question number 8. Kupffer cells occur in, and this appeared in 1993. Okay, they occur in A, spleen, B, kidney, C, brain, and D, liver. So Kupffer cells occur in D, liver. Okay, answer is B. Let's go to discussion. So Kupffer cells occur in liver. You have to remember this. Okay, this is anatomy of the liver. I think this was there also in part 1 of the same digestion absorption chapter. So you can go back and watch that video also. And they are hepatic macrophages. Okay, and are present on the surface of the endothelial cells of sinusoids. So liver have sinusoids over here. Okay, and they are endothelial cells over here. Okay, so Kupffer cells are present over here. Okay, this is just anatomy of the liver. You have to remember this piece of information. All right, there's nothing that we can help you with. So they are hepatic macrophages. Okay, so let's move on to the next question. Question number 9. Brunner's glands occur in, okay, we already discussed this is the first question, and this appeared in 1992. Brunner's glands occur in A, submucosa of duodenum, B, submucosa of stomach, C, mucosa of esophagus, D, mucosa of ileum. So Brunner's gland occurs in submucosa of duodenum. All right, this is clear. I told you duodenum, Brunner's gland is very exclusive to duodenum, so you have to remember that piece of information. So this appears to be important because it has occurred multiple times in the exam. All right, so your answer should be A. Okay, let's go to the discussion. So Brunner's glands occur in the submucosa of the duodenum. There's not much explanation that we can do. Just remember this piece of information, and let's move on to the next question. Okay, so question number 10. Pancreas produces A, 3 digestive enzymes and 1 hormone, B, 3 types of digestive enzymes and 2 hormones, C, 2 digestive enzymes and 1 hormone, D, 3 digestive enzymes and no hormone. Okay, so this appeared in the year 1991. Change this pen. Okay, so they are asking you about the numbers. All right, so we know pancreas is a compound gland. Okay, it has an exocrine part and an endocrine part. So the endocrine part secretes 2 types of hormones. So we know that for sure. So it's insulin and glucagon. Okay, and there are 3 types of digestive enzymes too. Okay, there's trypsinogen, chymotrypsinogen, and procarboxypeptidase. So your answer should be B. Okay, answer is B. Let's go to the discussion. So pancreas secretes 2 hormones, insulin and glucagon. Remember this? It secretes several enzymes, so trypsinogen, chymotrypsinogen, procarboxypeptidase, and apart from that it secretes amylases, nucleases, and lipases. Okay, please remember this also. Oh, sorry. So the next question. Let's go back to our question. So if you don't remember the enzyme, that you clearly know that it secretes 2 hormones, so this was a dead giveaway. You could have easily selected the right answer if you knew that for sure secretes two types of hormones. So obviously there are multiple types of digestive enzymes that it secretes, but this was a very clear giveaway. All right. Okay. Next question. Question number 11. Pancreatic juice and hormones of pancreas are produced by. This appeared in 90. Oops, sorry. Okay, so question number 11. Pancreatic juice and hormones of pancreas are produced by, and this appeared in 1990. Okay, so you have A, same cells, B, same cells at different times, C, statement is wrong, D, different cells. Okay, so pancreatic juice and hormones, there is pancreatic juice that is secreted. There are hormones also that are secreted from the pancreas. Okay, but like we've already discussed in question number 10, it is a compound gland, so there are two parts to it. Okay, there's an endocrine part and the exocrine part, and there are two different cells that perform these functions. So it is clearly the different cells. Okay, so answer is D. You will learn this more in detail when you study chemical coordination and integration. Okay, where you study the hormone system, the endocrine system also. So but please remember this. Okay, let's go to the discussion. The pancreas has an endocrine and an exocrine part. So the endocrine part is responsible for secreting hormones. Okay, the exocrine part, which has pancreatic acini or acinus, that is the singular acini, is responsible for secreting digestive enzymes. And the large and small ducts from the acini secrete sodium bicarbonate ions. Okay, so please remember that there are two types. Okay, so you have the islets of Langerhans. So this is the structure of the pancreas. Okay, so you have the islets of Langerhans over here. Okay, this is the endocrine part. This is the endocrine part. Okay, and you have the pancreatic acini over here. So this is the exocrine part. Okay, so clear? This has also appeared multiple times, so please remember, this seems to be an important piece of information. So to understand, it is important that you understand the structure of pancreas well. Okay, and what are the functions of the different cells that are present inside the pancreas. Okay, so let's move on to the next question. Okay, so question number 12. Secretin stimulates production of. This appeared in 1990. So you have A, saliva, B, gastric juice, C, bile, and D, pancreatic juice. Okay, so this is a direct question which has a direct answer to it. So the answer is D, pancreatic juice. Okay, let's go to the discussion. So secretin acts on the exocrine part of the pancreas. We just discussed the structure of the pancreas. Okay, there's an endocrine and the exocrine part. So secretin acts on the exocrine part of the pancreas and stimulates secretion of water and bicarbonate ions. Okay, so secretin was one of the first gastrointestinal hormone that was discovered. Okay, and it's secreted by S cells. I have already discussed this in part 1. Okay, so please go and watch part 1. There's the nice table with all the hormones and where they are secreted from and what is their function. Okay, so if you want, you can note that down. Okay, so 1 second before we go back to the question. I think I've answered the question. Stimulates the production of the pancreatic juice. Okay, that's the appropriate answer. Question number 13. Wharton's duct is associated with. This appeared in 1988. Sorry. And A, sublingual salivary gland, B, parotid salivary gland, C, submaxillary salivary gland, and D, Brunner's glands. So it's not D, Brunner's glands for sure, but the answer is C, submaxillary salivary gland. Okay, so answer is C. Let's go to the discussion. Okay, so I made a table here. If you want, you can note it down in your notebooks. and this will be very helpful for you to understand. So I have made a list of the salivary glands, the ducts, the associated ducts, the location of the gland, and where they pour the secretion into. Okay, where they pour the saliva into, which part of the mouth, the oral cavity. So you have parotid gland, which is the largest gland. You have the sublingual gland, which is the smallest gland, and you have the submandibular or submaxillary gland, which is medium in size. Okay, so parotid gland, the duct is Stenson's duct. Okay, sublingual is ducts of Rivinus or sublingual ducts, and C as in the third part is called Wharton's duct, which we've answered the question to. Okay, so this is a very helpful table. Okay, if you want, you can write it down in your notebooks. The location of the gland. Okay, so parotid gland is near the ears. Okay, they pour their secretion near the upper second molar. Okay, the upper second molar. Okay, so sublingual gland, their location is beneath the tongue. Okay, beneath the tongue. Just associate that with lingual, beneath the tongue. So floor of the oral cavity is where they pour their secretion into. And third is submandibular gland, which is located in the angles of the lower jaw. Okay, so oral cavity, they pour the secretion into the oral cavity near the lower central incisors. There is a nice diagram, yes, over here. So you can visualize where they are located. So you have your parotid gland here, you have a sublingual gland here, which is below the tongue here, and you have a submandibular gland here. Okay, and so the ducts that are present there. Okay, so clear? This was again direct. You had to know this. Okay, you have to know this to be able to answer this question. So clearly, like I said, if you note down that table, you will know the answer. Okay, you will if you memorize a table, you will be able to answer this question very easily. Okay, so next question. Okay, question number 40. Duct leading from parotid gland and opening into vestibule is. And this appeared in 1988. So you have the A. Haversian duct, or Haversian duct, B. Stenson's duct, C. Wolffian duct, D. Infraorbital duct. It is clearly B. Stenson's duct. Okay, so answer is B. Okay, so again we come back to this Stenson's duct. It's a parotid gland. Okay, let's go back to the questions. Yeah, so duct leading from parotid gland. All right, so that was clearly Stenson's. Oh, sorry, sometimes my Stenson's duct is the right answer for parotid gland. Okay, doesn't need much explanation, I guess. We've already discussed this table in the previous question, right? So you can go back, if you missed it, go back and watch that part. Okay, so the next question. Question number 15. Lamina propria is connected with A. acini, B. liver, C. Graafian follicle, and D. intestine. And this appeared in the year 1988. Lamina propria, clearly it is intestine. Okay, clearly there is no doubt about it. So your answer should be B. Okay, let's go to the discussion. So lamina propria forms a part of the alimentary canal structure. Okay, and it is made up of collagen and reticular fibers, and they're embedded in glycosaminoglycan matrix. Okay, so they're made up of collagen and reticular fibers, and they're embedded. The matrix is glycosaminoglycan. So in small intestine, it forms the core of each villus. Okay, so you have they are microvilli, right? So it forms the main part, the core, okay, of each villus. Okay, so here's the structure. So you have the villi over here. Okay, so this dotted part that you see here, that's lamina propria. So it basically forms a part of the mucosa. So you have the submucosa over here. Okay, submucosa is over here, Then you have the muscular mucosae, sorry, and then you have the lamina propria. Okay, so this forms a part of the mucosa. So the lamina propria, remember, if they ask, does it have crypts of Lieberkühn? Yes, it does have crypts of Lieberkühn. It even has a lymph nodule. Okay, it has lymphoid tissue also. Okay, it has lymphoid tissue. It has the glandular cells also, which are present in the crypts of Lieberkühn. Okay, so if a question like that appears, you know the answer, right? You can see a clear structure, an anatomy, and the histology of the intestine through this diagram. Okay, so clear. This was direct. Let's move on to the next question. Question number 16. The enzyme enterokinase helps in conversion of, it's appeared in NEET 2020, so it's quite recent. A, it converts protein into polypeptides. B, trypsinogen into trypsin. C, caesinogen into casein, or caseinogen into casein, whichever way. D, pepsinogen into pepsin. Okay, so enterokinase helps in conversion of trypsinogen into trypsin. I think we've discussed this in part 1 also. So enterokinase, when trypsinogen is secreted from, is a part of the pancreatic juice, it's secreted into the duodenum. Okay, so enterokinase is secreted in the intestinal epithelium, and that converts trypsinogen into trypsin. So trypsinogen is an inactive form of trypsin. So your answer should be B. Let's go to the discussion. I think I've discussed it mostly. Enterokinase helps in conversion of trypsinogen to trypsin. So trypsinogen is an inactive form, okay, of trypsin, and when enterokinase comes in, it converts that into the active form. Okay, clear? Direct question, no need for much explanation, right? Okay, so next. Okay, so we've come to the end of this video lecture, and I hope you've enjoyed today's video lecture, and I hope you've learned something new today. And I'm available on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, so you can follow me there for more updates. The link will be there in the description box below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to MG NEET Biology. All right, and I'll see you in the next video lecture. Bye.